Hey, what's up everybody? It's Pond Solo Fishing. Today I wanted to touch base with something that I love, my favorite part of fishing, and that is punching the pads. I'm sure you've probably heard of it, maybe fishing heavy cover. Depends on where you're at, it depends on how people talk about it. But it is probably the best way to catch huge bass, catch a lot of bass, and have a whole lot of fun while doing it. The problem is a lot of people really get kind of intimidated by it. They get hung up a lot. It is the easiest way to snag your line, and it's not a lot of fun when you do that. So I'm going to go over some different methods that you can use in order to be much more successful with it, in order to ensure that you're actually catching big fish. Now there's a couple different things that I'm going to talk about. One of course is going to be like reeds, grass, things of that nature. So we'll talk about that first. Then I want to go over different kinds of mats. All right, mats being layers of grass, different plants that don't connect to the ground, things that are just kind of sitting there. Now this could be vegetation, it could be like algae, it could be any number of things. It's just a layer on the surface, okay? And then of course I want to touch on lily pads as well. So very, very common, a lot of fishing out there as well. All right, so the biggest thing that we want to talk about, and this is going to apply to all three of these different areas, is what kind of pole you should use. So I'm a big advocate for cheap rods and reels. Reason why is because I want to make fishing affordable to everybody. All right, so if we keep telling everybody that you need to buy expensive equipment, a lot of people that are just barely getting by as it is aren't going to fish. We want more people fishing. We want this sport to take off. We want it to be huge. And in order to let other people experience the thing that we love so much, it has to be accessible. So the more we talk about how trashy a Zebco pole is, which it's not the greatest, you know, the more damage we're doing to our sport than anything. The fish don't care what kind of pole you have. The fish don't care what kind of reel you have. However, pads do care. Mats care. Grass cares. And what I mean by that is that if you're fishing a cheap pole, a light action pole, or a lightweight pole and everything in pads, you're going to hate life. It's not going to be fun. You're going to hang up a lot. It's just not going to be a fun experience for you. Okay? So you want to make sure you have the right type of gear. Regular water and everything where you're not able to get hung up like that, not that big of a deal. You can haul in a bass on pretty much any kind of pole. You can pull it in on a Barbie pole if you wanted to. The pole doesn't matter until there's a specific reason for it to matter. In this case, there's a big reason. All right. So in my case, I personally use Lew's rods, but Abu Garcia makes fantastic products as well. Ugly Stick is probably one of the best products out there that you can buy when it comes to pulling things in heavy cover. All right, so what you're going to want to have is you're going to want to have typically at least a medium, but I highly recommend a medium heavy pole fast action reel. Okay, so you want to make sure medium heavy, fast action. That's typically going to be the best setup overall if you want to be able to hang on to that fish and get it out of that cover. All right, main reason why you want that stiff pole like that is because you got to just force this thing out of the cover sometimes. And it literally, it can be a monster that you're trying to pull in. And if you don't have a strong enough pole, that pole could snap. There could be so much give that it can get off the hook. But you need that stability there and everything. So you have that leverage needed to yank it out of those pads, to yank it out of the grass. So remember, you're not just pulling a fish in. You're pulling a fish in, you're pulling grass in, you're pulling weeds in, whatever it is. You're pulling something else in with it, and that can add a lot of weight to your pole. And from that distance, and with how long the pole is, that's not always easy. So nice medium heavy rod is a perfect thing for that. All right. Now the first thing I want to talk about is going to be the grass. So the grass that's sitting in the middle of the water. Show a picture here. All right. So the grass that's sitting in the middle of the water. Typically, that's going to be where a lot of times you'll see fish spawning in there during the spawning seasons. Grass can be pretty thick. It's usually connected to the ground. Sometimes it's just above the water level and everything. But grass is a fantastic place for the fish to kind of hide out. They also will, like I said, they'll spawn there. So it's a good place to catch fish when they're, you know, just trying to hang out, when they're going for food, because a lot of the bait fish hide in there. Grass, you don't have to worry about as much as some of the other things that we're going to talk about here shortly. But still, with grass, you're still going to want something a little bit sturdier. So again, same rod and reel combination that you would use for any of the other things, that applies universally. However, when it comes to grass and things of that nature, typically the best thing to fish with is going to be Of course, you can use your frogs and things of that nature. The problem with the frogs is that they get into the grass and they just sit on top of the grass. So unless you're casting right next to the grass, it's not going to do you any good. So I see a lot of people out there fishing frogs. Great, it's a lot of fun. Fish hits it, golden. If you don't get hung up in the grass, no problem. The biggest issue is that you want to get into the grass. So I'm not talking about just being on the outside, because what you're missing is a lot of times this grass will kind of fold over a hole, be like a little cave inside the middle of this grass. All right, that cave is where the fish are typically hiding. I find more bass by going into the grass than I do going around the grass. All right, so keep that in mind when you're looking for fish out there. So what I normally recommend for that particular situation, and we do a lot of this in Florida, is typically 1 ounce weight. Put it on with a with any kind of attachment or something that gives you a little extra length here and everything. I like to use this this quick release so that I can switch things out. So if one thing's not working, I can change it up to something else. But also the main reason why I use it, if you notice, this gives a good distance between this super heavy sinker. Usually about a 1 ounce is what I use. Half ounce at the lightest, but normally you're going to need a good solid 1 ounce, maybe more depending on how fresh that grass is. But this will give you a little bit of a distance between the sinker and the hook. And the reason why that's important is because if it's right next to the hook, like you would normally have on a Carolina rig, just to kind of illustrate, the fish's mouth is right here. So when it comes in and sliding especially, bam, hits them right in the face. Now, you know, obviously the fish is hooked already, so it's already feeling some kind of pain there, assuming they feel pain. But it also is an easy way to knock the fish off the hook. All right, so the further you have the sinker away from the hook itself, the better, but you don't want it too far away because, again, we're trying to make it a weed-free presentation to the best of our ability, which is why I like to use a round sinker as opposed to like a triangle or something along those lines. They tend to get caught up a little bit more. All right, now a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll have this sinker, they'll have this quick disconnect, and to keep this from sliding a lot, because that obviously the slide is what makes it knock off the hook. A lot of times what they'll do is they use bobber stops and they'll pop those right on both sides, maybe some beads, and this will slow how quickly it comes in because it's still heavy, so a lot of times it's going to move those stops still. But if it doesn't move them, fantastic. So a lot of people put those on there. I personally don't. No particular reason why I don't, I just don't. All right, just one extra thing I got to throw on there, one extra thing I got to carry with me when I go. I do a lot of kayak fishing, so I don't want to bring a lot of extra stuff. So it's personal preference. Which one's right? Probably the bobbers. So that's probably the better option. But again, I've had no problem catching fish in pads, so no big deal there. All right. Now the next thing I also want to mention too is when you're fishing inside of grass or you're fishing inside of pads or mats, you want to make sure you have the right kind of line on your pole. Okay. A lot of people I see going in there with like a 10-pound test or the same kind of line that they would use anywhere else. It's not going to work. You need to have a good, strong line, preferably a braid, preferably 50. Sometimes I see people going all the way up to 80-pound test. I don't know if you need to get that ridiculous, but most people recommend probably between 50 to 65-pound test. I would say that's what the majority of people are using that have been doing this a while and love and have success in the pads. 50 to 65-pound test, braided. All right. Color, that doesn't really matter too much what the color is. Just make sure it kind of blends with the water that you're using and everything. I wouldn't freak yourself out too much about the color itself. But you want that strong braid there because you need it to be able to hold up to the force of you yanking the fish out of those pads. All right. So line, rod, this is pretty much the only time where those two things are critical. If you don't have the right thing, it can be a little rough for you. Now, there are going to be some people that swear by 20-pound and 30-pound braid. If it works for you, great. That's fantastic. But do you really want to take the chance that you're going to lose a fish? All right. If you've already got a heavy sinker, that line, that little tiny extra bit of line on there and everything is not going to make a difference. I promise. All right. So you might as well go with bigger. Bigger is better in this case. If you just don't want to change out your line, or if you only have one rod, okay. Maybe you might want to just stick with a 30-pound so then you can use it for all applications. I use a 30-pound for everything. And I live in Florida though, so depending upon scenarios and situations. But Florida, 30 pound, you can use it all day, every day. But the 50, 65, that would be my recommendation. All right. So with this kind of setup, a couple different ways that you can do it. Some people, they're going to use a Carolina rig with it, Texas rig, of course, or a Carolina rig if you're doing the bobber stops and all that, or Texas rig, whatever you want to do there. Pop the hook on it, pop the worm on, you have a weedless presentation. Can it still get caught up? Sure, just like anything, but it works. It works just fine. The key thing is we're just trying to punch through. Okay, so 1 ounce weight, and then of course the other option, and this is my personal preference here, would be any kind of jig or rig or whatever that has weed guard. Let me pop this a little closer. All right, so this weed guard here, see how it connects over with the hook? It makes a big difference on whether it gets connected or not to grass and things like that. So I personally swear by this kind of setup. Pop it on, just like that. All right, and we'll talk about the trailer that I would use in just a little bit and everything, but we'll talk about that last. But this would be my personal preference for setup, and this is going to be for mats or anything. Now, one thing you notice, with this particular one, this one has a pretty big head. Sometimes you can buy them much bigger than this and everything. This is not heavy enough for grass. Okay, this will work for some light cover, some really, really light grass, but if you're going into reeds and stuff, that even, I think this is maybe like, I don't know, 1/4 to 1/2 ounce, I can't remember exactly, but that's probably not going to be enough for the grass. You're probably still not going to punch through. The way you're going to know if it's enough, and the way you know if you need this, is if you tie this on and it doesn't cut through the grass and it just hangs up on top of it, you need more weight, okay? So you just add more weight. You might even have to go up to a 2 ounce and everything if that's fresh grass. If it's green, probably going to have to go with something a little bit thicker. Again, you're trying to punch through it. That's the reason why we call it punching the pads and not hanging out on top of the pads. Last time I checked, the fish aren't hanging out in the air. So if you can't get through them, you can't get through the grass, you can't get through the mat, you're not going to get the fish there below it. All right? So again, there's a difference between fishing around the pads or fishing in them, or fishing in the reeds, or fishing in the mat. That's where they're hanging out. That's where you want to get. The pressure on those fish is lower because nobody's fishing in there. So you have a greater chance of catching something because everybody else is fishing on the outside of it. Okay? So the more aggressive you are, the better opportunity that you have to get right where the fish are at, not try to coerce them to get out of that area. Okay? And that's what a lot of people are doing. That's literally what they're doing when they're out there, jigging around on the outside of they're trying to coerce the fish to come out of where they're naturally hiding. Go to where the fish are. It makes more sense to me. All right? So that's that. And then this, of course, here's one, same kind of thing, brush guard, but this is a mini. So this one works a little bit better in my opinion, simply because of the fact that, I'm putting a big weight on it. So, but again, you can rig it up any way you want. Carolina rig, Texas rig, they work perfectly fine. I catch a ton of fish with those. It just depends on the fish, how they're biting. Okay, so if they're not biting with this, I'm going to switch it up and I might throw a different kind of rig out there. Okay, personal preference. Again, probably not your best option for grass, unless you're fishing on the outside. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about is punching through mats. Okay, when I say mats, I mean layers of grass. There's different kind of plants that don't connect to the ground itself, but are just kind of, it's like a layer that's just sitting on top. And this could even be a layer of trash, realistically, or algae. It could be any kind of mat that if you throw out a frog, it's just going to sit right on top, and the fish are swimming under it and everything, but you're just not accomplishing anything. You're right on top. Okay? So if the fish never see you like on an algae mat, in Florida, the algae gets pretty thick. You're never going to get a fish on an algae mat and everything with how thick that gets sometimes if you're pitching a frog out there. It's just not going to happen. So sometimes you get lucky if it's not super thick, but most of the time that vibration on the top of it, it's too thick for them to actually feel it and notice it. All right, so you want to punch through that. Now that stuff can get pretty thick. So you'll see a lot of fishermen out there that are going to throw a 1.5 upwards to a 3 ounce sinker on that. Same exact rig, pop it on, rig, pop it on like that and everything. Again, I like these disconnects, these quick disconnects, so I can change it up. So if this guy's not working, I can go ahead and throw on a Carolina, Texas rig, whatever I want to do there, no problem, okay? Yeah, it's not the true form of one, but this quick disconnect saves me a ton of time, gives me a lot of versatility, and has me in the water more than if I'm, retying rigs all the time. All right, personal preference again, but you do want to make sure with these, you want to make sure that they have a good enough pound test to be able to hold up. A lot of people will buy the smallest ones they can find, the cheapest ones they can find. This one right here is a 40-pound test. That's typically what I use on these. And super, super strong. I bought them at Walmart, really easy to find. There's other ones that you can find out there that are probably rated for like 5 pounds. It's not going to be enough for pads. You really don't want to lose a fish because of a stupid quick disconnect breaking. That's the dumbest way to lose a fish. All right, so keep that in mind. But again, punching mats, let me show you a picture of what the mats look like. Punching through the mats is basically the same as the grass. The only difference is that you're kind of going straight down into it versus kind of coming up over the top of it and going into a clump. Okay, so with the mats, they're below the mat. With the grass, they're kind of, usually you're trying to find a hole within that grass, that tall grass that's sticking out of the water. Okay, so again, a mat with the grass is laying down is different than the grass standing up. This grass connected to the ground, this grass not connected to the ground. There's a greater chance for you to hook up on things and everything. Coming backwards with this grass, there's a greater chance with this grass to pull things. Okay, that's why we don't want to be on the top, because then you're just yanking the algae with you. If you go under the algae and you drop straight through it, you don't have to worry about that. You're below the algae line, you're not pulling it with you. Another reason why you want to punch through it as opposed to sit on top of it. Does you no good if your frog's completely covered in algae. Okay. Then finally, of course, we got the lily pads. Lily pads are fantastic. They're really easy to see. There's usually some open areas that you can get into. This is why a frog works in those areas, because the pads normally aren't so smacked together that you're just sitting on top of pads. Okay, so the frog has a lot of opportunity in the pads because you're skipping the frog on the pad, gives a little vibration. As soon as you pop off the pad, the fish is waiting for it. Hits it when it comes off that pad. Or sometimes it'll hit it right when it's on the pad. But the pads aren't super thick, there's good vibration, not as much to hang up on. That's a good reason why these hooks are right on top, because it's skimming over the top, nothing to hang up on. Frogs work, I got a fly here, I got a rat, they are literally the same thing. They all function the same way, the fish don't care, they basically see them all the same. Okay, so whatever you choose to fish there, that's fine. The other option I use there is, again, we go back to the sinker. This one, I might use a 1 ounce sinker tops on lily pads. Depends on how thick they are. This is where this guy comes into place. This 1/8 ounce, half ounce right here, 1/4 ounce, whatever this is. I think it's probably 1/4 to a half, really. It's pretty thick. But with this guy, that's where this guy comes in. It's just heavy enough to give me a little bit of weight so it drops in after a pad. So after that first pad that I land on top of, it'll drop in one of those holes and now I'm in the water. Okay, so pads are a little bit easier because once you get into the water, you're in the water. This will just help pull it down a little bit faster and easier, especially if the pads are pretty close together. That's the only reason why I use weight. Now, if you want to go straight through the pads and they're tight together, throw a 1 ounce on there. Whatever, have at it, okay? But it's not really needed on the pads. Pads, you just got to find a gap in the pad somewhere, something heavy enough where it'll sink through, and like I said, 1/4 ounce, half ounce will typically get the job done, because once you're into the pads, now you're good. But again, it's all personal preference there. Okay. Now the next thing I want to talk about, or the last thing I want to talk about here, is going to be the trailer. Okay. Now what I mean by trailer is typically going to be anything that's going to connect on the back end of a jig, of a chatterbait, or whatever you're using and everything. I probably wouldn't use a chatterbait so much on when you're fishing mats and all that. There's more to get hung up there, but the trailer is anything that's going on the hook that's going to flail behind it. All right. Now, in general, when you're doing it, it doesn't matter what you put on there. Okay. Pads and especially mats are a little bit different because there's more stuff to get hung up on if you use the wrong one. So I personally prefer, and I imagine a lot of other fishermen would say the same, I prefer something that's a little bit stiffer of a soft bait. Okay. So one of the things that I use here, I'm going to go over a couple different options for you because of all these options, I'm sure you guys have at least one of these in your tackle box, but it shows you there's a lot of different ways you could do this. One thing is, for example, we got the Rojas Fighting Frog from Big Bite Baits. I like this one a lot. Works pretty good. Has good action to it. This one's a little bit looser than I normally want to use because you see these little flaily things here. Looks kind of more like a frog. I don't know, or like a crawl than a frog personally, but you know, whatever. I'm not the one that named it. But this right here has some flails to it and everything. I like lizards a lot, so I might use this if the vegetation isn't crazy heavy. The problem is that with all these extra things, it's going to pull algae in with you, okay? So this is probably about as loose and crazy as I would get it, all right? And just to kind of give you guys an idea what it looks like, pops in there, and then it just flails behind, okay? Just flails behind. All right, so this is pretty good. And you want a compact size as well, because otherwise you'll have something that's bent over like this, and that's not appealing. So you want something compact because it doesn't go very far on the hook. If you notice, this hook is kind of compact. So half of its body is just dangling, okay? So the more compact, the better when it comes to this type of rig. All right, another option if you want to go cheap, you got Zoom, usually a couple bucks for a pack. This is the Super Speed Craw. This color is fantastic. This is actually one of my favorite craws. It's the Okeechobee. If you notice, it's like a green pumpkin looking color on one side, and then it's got the blue on the other side. This looks fantastic in the water, especially if it's a little bit darker water. It gives it just enough shimmer in there to make it work. But if you notice, this one's a lot stiffer, This to me is much more ideal than the other one, but I wanted to show you both just so you can kind of see the difference. Again, rig it on there. Notice most of the body on this one is still on the hook, okay? So it still gives a little bit of action, but not too crazy. And it does stay on there a lot better, okay? Next one that I just started using recently, this is a pretty stiff bait, works pretty good. It's kind of a, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody else rig this particular brand here. Or I've never seen anybody else use it, period, but I've never seen anything quite like this on this particular setup. But this is Fanatic. It's a, I don't know, it's a company that's out of Ukraine. I'm not even sure how I got this, to be perfectly honest with you. It just magically appeared one day. But they work pretty good. This is called a Boxer 4.5 inch. Well, they say 4.5, but I'm sure they mean 4.5. And it's colored 004, which kind of looks like a green pumpkin with green specks on there. So that doesn't ultimately matter too much. But this right here has fantastic movement. The reason why I like it, it's pretty compact, maybe a little longer than I would like. Maybe like a 4-inch would probably be more ideal. But it's still pretty firm. It gets through the water and it has this little paddle tail at the end. So to me, fantastic option. The fish seem to like it. These ribs that it has push the water, really cool. I don't know if fish think it's cool, but honestly, it gets fish, so that's all that matters. Actually, I used it by accident one time. I had it, I thought I brought something else with me, and I had that with me. I rigged it up and it worked. Worked all day, so that was pretty good. Another brand is, that you might not have ever heard of, Great Lakes. Pretty decent quality here. This is for somebody that's trying to be a little bit more authentic. This, of course, is a frog. Again, this one might be a little bit on the big side. Okay, I don't personally use this, but I see other people using frogs. Again, some soft frogs because the majority of their frogs, you know, when you is on the hook. There we go. Majority of the body is on the hook, but it's firm enough where it's going to kind of hang together pretty good. It has fantastic action. Looks really, really cool in the water. I did play with it a little bit out there. I haven't tried to actively fish it. One thing that I do like is that it has these nice slots right here on both sides. So it pushes the water really well. But also the cool thing about it is it hooks up really easily. So you can hide a hook in there extremely well. Like that hook will just flush right in there. So it's really good. You hide the entire hook. It's fantastic. And if you notice, it's kind of got this perfect hook-shaped body, really. So, you know, even an Then you can offset or straight. It doesn't matter what kind you use there. They both work fantastic on it. So I'm probably going to start using that a little bit more just to try it out. And then of course, one of my favorites, my favorite trailer is Biospawn. I love their products. Fantastic product. The only thing that I've never really had a lot of luck is the plasma tail, but I guess the fish just don't like them in my area. I don't know. But every other Biospawn product has been absolutely fantastic, especially this BioBug. You talk to people that use these things and they'll swear by them. Fantastic product. All right, with the BioBug, if you don't like black licorice, you're probably not going to like this one because it smells just like black licorice, but I think that's kind of the magic sauce to get fish to bite. Again, throw it on there, and this one's pretty stiff, but it has great action. It has that scent in it, so it works out really good. All right, so it gives you guys quite a few different options. Fishing, again, it's all about personal preference. I say this over and over again. This is the way that I do it. There's going to be plenty of people that say I'm an idiot, and that's not how it works. Okay, I've caught a ton of fish using these methods. There's a lot of other fishermen that do the exact same thing. There's people that do slight variations of what I do, but that's what fishing is all about. It's all about trying some things, taking ideas that other people came up with and making them your own. Okay, if you don't feel confident in what you're doing, it's not going to work. So the key is find something that works, that you feel confident with, that produces results consistently, and stick with it. If it catches at least one fish, it works. If you do something one way and everybody else says it's wrong, but it catches one fish, clearly it works. Are there other things that might work better? Yeah, sure. But who knows? Maybe your route is going to be the absolute best one. Somebody came up with the Carolina. Somebody came up with the Texas. Somebody came up with jigging and all that. These all were created by somebody who tried something different than what was being done already. All right? So it's trial and error, trial and error. The only main things you want to remember is you want to get through those mats. You want to get through those pads. You want to get to the fish. So if that's your goal and you want to punch through those, this is how you punch through them. Lots of ways to do it. This is how I do it. Make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, throw your comments down below. I would love to hear the different ways that you guys do it. Let's make this a learning session and everything. I learn from you, you learn from me. Hopefully we can come up with a lot of different ideas on different ways that we can make this happen. Again, hit those subscribe buttons. Until next time.